Hello, first graders. For math today, I have our I can statement here ready to go, but before we do that, you're going to have to gather some materials for me today, okay? So, watch closely and make sure you have all the right objects. The first is, I want you to find a crayon. Now, I got a crayon that I have never used before. If you have a crayon that you've never used before, that would be amazing. Otherwise, try to find a crayon that maybe you've only used a little bit, so it's still mostly full length. Okay, so you want a full length crayon. I have a glue stick here. I have 6 centimeter cubes. 1, 2, 3, not centimeter cubes, linking cubes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 linking cubes put together. Okay, and I have a counting chip, okay, or a counter. These are those little circles that we use to count and add. That's yellow and red, or maybe red and white, depending on what you have. Okay, so you'll need these 4 objects. Now these might be things that you need to go dig out and get. So if you need to pause, go ahead and find a full-length crayon, a glue stick, 6 linking cubes, and 1 counter. Okay. You will also need your Module 3, remember a new math book, your Module 3 math activity book. Okay. And a pencil with that, as well as your whiteboard. Your whiteboard is just a nice surface you can use for your things today. You won't necessarily be writing on it very much. Okay, so I'm going to set my objects over here so you can see if you're still finding things. Those are the 4 things that I want today, along with my math book. Okay, our I can statement today says, I can compare the length of 2 objects. Okay, so our fancy word today that we will need to think a little bit about is this word, compare. Compare means we're going to decide something today, first graders. Is one thing shorter than, longer than, or the same length as something else? So we will have 2 objects and we will decide, is one shorter than, longer than, or the same length as the other one? Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to write a sentence frame on my whiteboard. You do not have to write it, but you should be following along with it as we use it. Okay? It's going to have a lot of blanks. We're going to have to fill in the blanks. So blank, this is going to be an object, is blank than blank. Oh boy. Something is something than something. Now, I will give you a hint. This one up above here will either say shorter or it will say longer. We have to decide which one. Okay? So shorter or longer than. Let's go ahead and start out with an example that you can just watch Mrs. Garris use. So this crayon is very important today, boys and girls. It's going to be your measuring tool. Okay, we're going to use this almost like it's a ruler or a measuring tape. This is our measuring tape today. Okay? All right. So since everything's going to be compared to this crayon, I can actually add something to my sentence frame here. Than the crayon. We're going to compare everything to this crayon right now. Okay? All right. So let's start with a first object. Why don't we first start with the glue stick? So grab the glue stick, and you should have your crayon as well. And our measuring rules tell us that our 2 things that we're comparing need to have the same end point. So that means that they have to start in the same place. So if I measure my crayon and my glue stick like this, do they have an end point where they're both starting? They do not. I either need to line up the bottoms together or the tops. It's up to you. Either way would be an endpoint. I'm going to do both of the bottoms because they're nice and flat. Even though they want to roll away from me, I'm going to hold my finger here so they don't. And now I can see, since they have the same endpoint, let's think about our sentence frame. We're talking about the glue stick. So this blank would say the glue stick is blank than the crayon. Take a look at that glue stick. Is the glue stick shorter than the crayon, or is the glue stick longer than the crayon? So you're focusing on the glue stick here. Is the glue stick shorter than or longer than the crayon? Well, my endpoints are down here, and I notice that the glue stick stops before the crayon does. That tells me this glue stick is shorter than. Okay, I'm going to put my glue stick right here so you can read with me. Here we go. The glue stick is shorter than the crayon. Good work. Ready to try another one? Put your glue stick away. Remember, we're using our crayon to measure. Keep your crayon out. Why don't we use our linking cubes? Take a peek at your linking cubes. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that because we don't know now. So now I'll start my sentence with the cubes. The cubes are, we're going to say, the cubes are, let's use our endpoint, so do it with me. We could even do it sideways, we don't have to do it upside down, as long as both the bottoms match up. Now, looking at the cubes are shorter than the crayon. Do they stop before the crayon, or the cubes are longer than the crayon? Which sentence is true? The cubes are shorter than the crayon, or are the cubes longer than the crayon? I see the cubes go much past the end of that crayon, don't they? About a whole cube's length worth. So, the cubes are longer than the crayon. Will you say that with me? The cubes are longer than the crayon. Good work. Okay. Why don't you try this last one with the crayon and the counter? You go ahead and try measure them up. Decide about that counter. Compare the counter to the crayon. The counter is blank than the crayon. Well, let's see. Are mine lined up to measure right now? Nope. Now, I could be looking with my eyeballs and just maybe tell right now, but a true mathematician is going to match up those endpoints just to be sure. So I want the bottom of the circle to match up with the bottom of my crayon. Okay? The bottom of that circle counter matches up with the bottom of the crayon. What do you see? The counter is blank than the crayon. What do you say? Shorter or longer than? I hope you said the counter is shorter than. Okay, it's much, much smaller. It doesn't near reach the top of that crayon the way we'd like it to. So, we call that shorter than. So there you have it. We just practiced comparing the length of two objects. Now we're going to do it a little bit more. The only material you'll need now is the crayon, your math book, and your pencil. Okay? The rest you can put off to the side. Yesterday you worked on shorter than and longer than. Okay, today we're going to do the same thing. But we're also going to start thinking about, if I know something is longer and something is shorter, and maybe I can throw in a third thing and compare and figure it out based on what I know. So in our math book, boys and girls, it talks about a paper strip in our directions, but we're going to pretend that paper strip is this crayon today. Okay? So it says use the paper strip. Really, we're going to use the crayon to measure each picture. Circle the words you need to make the sentence true, then fill in the blank. Okay? So we have here where we're going to have to circle longer than, shorter than, or the same length as. But we also have some blanks here where we're going to have to write those words, shorter than, longer than, or the same length as. Okay? All right. Let's take a peek. We are first comparing where it says the paper strip, but actually, what are we using? We're going to use our crayon today. So, the baseball bat is blank the paper strip. Longer than, shorter than, or the same length as. Well, we don't really know. They kind of look close in length, so let's make sure we line them up. You see how my bat's going diagonal? So my crayon's going to have to go diagonal as well. I still need an end point, so let's match up the end of our bat with the end of our crayon. And our crayon's going to want to go on a straight line. Okay, I matched up the end of my bat with the end of my crayon. And look, it's the baseball bat longer than, shorter than, or the same length as this crayon. I see the bat going a little bit farther. So the bat must be longer than, we're going to circle it, longer than the crayon we're pretending. Remember, paper strip we don't have, we're using a crayon. Now let's take a look at the book. Take a look at the book. Measure them up with their end points. So the very end of this book over here is where the very end of my crayon is going to go. Ooh, close. Now, if you have a brand new crayon like me, one is longer. If you have a crayon that maybe you used just a little bit, you may be looking at something like the same length as, huh? However, my crayon is brand spanking new. It goes past that book just a little bit. So, the sentence says the book is longer than the crayon, shorter than the crayon, or the same length as the crayon. Is the book longer or shorter than my crayon? I see the book doesn't quite reach the end of my crayon, so the book must be shorter than. Now, if the baseball bat is longer than the crayon, and the book is shorter than the crayon, then is the baseball bat shorter than or longer than the book? If the baseball bat is longer than the crayon, the book is shorter than the crayon, then is the baseball bat longer or shorter than the book? Well, this is how we might go back and see. Since we know the baseball bat was longer than the crayon, but the book wasn't even as long as the crayon, then the baseball bat must be longer than the book, right? So, if I want to know how to spell longer than, I see it here in these boxes, I can copy it to make sure I spell it correctly. Now we no longer need our crayon, so you just need, we do need our crayon. We do need our crayon. We are going to now use our crayon to compare two different things. So, like we see in this picture here, I see they call this a tube, okay? They call it a tube, and then we see the cup, okay? Now, the tube and the cup are not lined up, are they? they're not giving the same endpoint anywhere because the tube's going this way, horizontal, and the cup's going vertical. So we're going to use our crayon to help us figure out if the tube is longer than or shorter than or the same length as the cup. Now, for your reference, when we're writing these terms, they're right here in the directions. There's longer than, you can underline. Shorter than, why don't you go ahead and circle it. And the same length as, maybe we'll draw a box around that. Okay, so those are your phrases you'll be using for the blanks, so you can look at those to help you spell. All right, let's take a peek. If I put my crayon the same endpoint as this tube, okay, I can see that the tube is longer than my crayon. Okay, tube is longer. Let's go ahead and flip the crayon over so we have an endpoint with the cup. Now, is the cup longer than my crayon? It's not. So the tube is longer than my crayon. The cup is shorter than my crayon. So the tube, is it going to be longer than the cup? Or is it going to be shorter than the cup? Or are they the same length? If one is longer, then we know it's going to be longer than this one because this one is shorter than my crayon, right? So we're going to write the tube is longer than the cup. Okay, so it's almost now like we're using three things. We're comparing the tube with the crayon and then the crayon with the cup to help figure out what the comparison is between the tube and the cup, which is kind of confusing, but I think you'll get the hang of it. Now, some things we can look at with our eyeballs and see. We can use our eyes to measure sometimes. Other times, we can't always depend on them, so we use a tool to help us. Okay, today our tool is this crayon. We'll learn some different tools throughout our math module. Okay, so now we have the iron. That's this right here. The iron is blank the ironing board. So this is the iron here. This is the ironing board. Now this is something that you can probably look at with your eyeballs and decide, right? Is the iron longer than, shorter than, or the same length as the ironing board? Or if you'd like, you can use your crayon. So the iron, if I line it up with my end point here, I see that iron is way shorter than my crayon. And if I line it up here with the ironing board, I see the ironing board is longer than my crayon. So that must mean that the iron is shorter or longer than the board? It is shorter than. Go ahead and use those words to write on the line. You will have to write neatly and maybe a little bit smaller than you're used to fit it all there. All right, good work. Now, boys and girls, down here at the bottom are some challenge questions. If you'd like to finish the challenge questions, you can ask a grown-up to help you read the directions and finish that up. Okay? If not, you're going to head over to Seesaw to finish up your activity for today. Okay, your lesson 2 activity. We're not going to do any more of the pages of the problem set or the exit ticket. I want you to do the activity that's on Seesaw to show your teacher if you can decide if things are longer, shorter, or the same length as another object. Okay, so head over to Seesaw to show what you know, and thank you for working with me.